Welcome to Speak Your Truth, a podcast created to promote self-awareness and unlock your potential, giving you the strength to live your truth.
Here we go. So, ownership of mistakes, guys. Maybe we should lead off by introducing ourselves, because I think nobody really knows who we are yet.
Was requested.
We're kind of brand new. I'm Ryan.
Last name. Don't forget last name.
Oh, LaDuke. I guess that's important.
I'm Aaron Brinkley.
And we're here bringing you Speak Your Truth. The importance of Speak Your Truth is everyone's got something awesome to say. And we need to share it with everyone. If we can't share it with everyone, then it's like it doesn't exist. And you out there have a lot to say too. So we want to give you a platform. So we're putting ourselves out here. And bump our way through, growing, changing, becoming better. And today we're going to talk about ownership of mistakes, because a lot of people, they try to evade and sidestep mistakes. So how do I avoid mistakes? Honestly, in my personal opinion, you don't. If you try to avoid mistakes, you're only going to go too slow, or you're not going to do anything, because everything you do, you're going to make mistakes. For me, parenting is one of those things. I have a 12-year-old son, and I try to tell him all the time I have some answers that I can give him, but he doesn't listen. So I just continuously tell him, so maybe eventually he'll listen.
Dad's never right. I know I had the same issue with my dad. After he passed, and the older I got, the more I started realizing a lot of the stuff he had to say pretty relevant. Not all of it, but most of it.
Yeah.
I guess there's one part of being a dad that I don't look forward to, because I'm sure my kid's going to be as resistant as I was, hard-headed, which in the grand scheme of things is probably going to be a good thing, but at the same time, like, to deal with that, to deal with a little me, yikes.
Yeah, my dad always used to say, I hope you have a child just like you were.
God.
And I do. My son is very hard-headed. He's a little more intellectual. With all of the technology nowadays, it's easy to get information. But the hardest thing to get is wisdom. These kids think they have all the wisdom because they have all the information. But when you have information without wisdom, that's way more chaotic, because then you could make all kinds of bad decisions with all that information. We need to teach the kids that they got to reach out to the people that have been through the things that they're going to go through.
Like you said, the information lacks practical application. And I think that kind of leads back to what we're talking about as far as like making mistakes. Like, I can know how to do something, but until I actually go through and do it and potentially fail at that, like, I don't really, it's a difference between, I guess, of like knowing and understanding. You can read something and understand it, but until you do it, you never really know.
Yeah.
Like practice, doing something consistently. I think you were talking about shooting baskets and things like that.
Oh, yeah,
like,
a little bit ago.
Right. Confidence is a big portion of that. And I think that's what the main vocal point of that discussion was about. But going through and doing something consistently is what builds that confidence. But through that practice, that practical application, that's where all those mistakes are actually made. And like we're talking about ownership of mistakes, it's going through, and if you're, say, shooting baskets and missing those baskets consistently, clearly you have to own that you're doing something wrong. Something needs to change, and making those adjustments is going to just propel you forward and make you better.
Yeah. But back to ownership of mistakes. If you own it, no one can use it against you. Let me explain that. If you do something wrong, and there's someone that you're affecting, and after doing that thing that was wrong, and you try to blame someone else for it, that person that you blame for that problem, knowing it wasn't their fault, they're actually going to resent you, even if you then apologize after the fact. Once you create that dynamic of, I'm going to blame you for something that may or may not be your fault, you're going to put yourself in a spot where someone else can use that against you now.
well, it's not only other people, but I think circumstances as well, or like situations. I think the biggest portion of growing up is taking responsibility for everything. That may not be the actual thing that happened, but your reaction to that as well too. I know I am probably the most guilty person I can think of, and I have to catch myself constantly of something happens to me, whether it was my control or not, understanding that my reaction to that is also part of, I guess, the growth factor, or like potentially making a mistake. You do something to me, it's on me to then take that and put my perspective on it, and how I react to that is a big portion of, I think you mentioned earlier, like when you're talking about your son, the whole victim mentality, and getting away from that. A good example for me in general, I go and I end up getting in a car wreck, and I'm trying to blame all of these outside circumstances, when regardless of the situation, like, I was in control of the vehicle, clearly did not control it very well, and I'm mad. But I'm mad not because of really the wreck itself, because clearly it's just a thing. It can get fixed. Am I happy about it? No. But I'm more mad because in my mind, I'm talking myself out of taking responsibility for that situation, then also taking the responsibility off myself for how I'm reacting to it, and letting myself get mad when there's no reason for that. And the problem is, without taking that responsibility for that mistake or that problem, all I'm doing is sulking in it. So what should have been a day process of getting over it, getting the car fixed and moving on, becomes a week-long vendetta of me being mad, blaming other people, blaming myself, and this vicious cycle of guilt and prolonging the problem that there's a week of my life that is kind of lost to such a minor situation. And because of that, instead of me just immediately taking ownership and moving forward, it makes it easier the next time to do the same thing. And I become more of a victim to a scenario instead of controlling it, growing from it, and getting something out of it. Like, if I don't take ownership of my mistakes, I'm never going to get any better, either at the scenario itself or controlling myself and my reaction to that scenario to be more on top of it, to be more in control.
Yeah, it's actually a way to minimize loss and maximize gain. Because if you put yourself in the thought process of, it's my fault, you instantly go into solution mode. And guys are really built that way. They're built for solution mode. But if you put your mindset into victim mode, all of a sudden, someone else has to go into solution mode because you're the victim. It happened to you. If you take it and own it, it gets put in your pocket, no one can use it against you, and you move on from it. Especially a car accident. I'm glad you brought up a car accident, because there was a story that I heard, I can't quote exact, but somebody got into a car accident, and they ended up being a paraplegic. They were told they would never walk again. They fought back. They actually walked again, not 100%, but they were able to walk again, and they were able to actually live a full life. Now, you can flip that, and you can put that in a perspective of, if they were a victim, they could have been a paraplegic their whole life. What do you want to do? What is your goal? Do you want to be the paraplegic, or do you want to be the one that fights back, owns the mistake, and can move on from it? And there's a lot of power in owning it. I think Gary Vee talks about it a lot. He says, everything is my fault, because if everything is my fault, I can fix it fast and go make some more money. Very simple. But it's one of the hardest things, because you think that by it being your fault, that you lost credibility. You lost, XP points, so to speak. But the flip side on that is people's perspective of you changes when you own it versus when you blame others. You actually gain XP points. You gain that credibility with other people when you own it, because then other people don't feel like they need to protect themselves from you. And when you don't feel like you need to protect yourself from you by owning it, that just 10x's everything you can do, because then you don't slow down, you don't stop, you don't feel bad, you don't let that negative emotion stop you from moving forward. It kind of goes back to the last show with the deciding. You got to decide to own those mistakes. That's why all of these steps are actually going to all kind of meld together. And I'm actually excited for when we start doing interviews, because I'm going to start doing those next week. And once we finish with our 7 steps, we're going to start having those interviews and going through the process with each of those people so they can speak their truth, and other people can hear that and they can use that to stand on those people's shoulders so they can speak their truth as well.
I'm really looking forward to real life practical examples of, all of these things, because anyone you meet that's successful in any realm, these 7 steps are really the main basis, that foundation of what has made them successful. And what's cool is to see personal perspective on those 7 steps, how they've used those, how they've worked out for them or worked against them by not using them, and that transition in life and I guess personal growth through their own situations. And what I find really cool is as we start to talk to more people, or just people I've talked to already in life before, the commonalities are eerily similar, and we're all kind of in the same struggle. And the more you can realize that and understand that, the easier it is, like you said, to make decisions, to take ownership, and understand that you are stronger than you think you are. You are bigger than any problem, and if you're not bigger, we're connected to something that's bigger. But that's a whole rabbit hole we don't need to go down.
We can get into that some other time.
Yeah, we'll cover that basis eventually. I'm sure it'll start to come up as we meet more people and allude to their scenarios, because I'm sure that underlying factor is a big portion of getting through some of the darker, more difficult times, or that clarity to give you a better perspective on where you're at and where you're going. But
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned clarity. That's kind of what this is designed for. This is to open people's mind up a little bit and realize that, kind of like what you were saying about, we're all very similar. There's really not a whole lot of differences, other than our goals are different and maybe the way that we get to them is a little bit different, but the philosophies and the mindsets and the processes behind them, they kind of all remain the same. And you can look at a lot of highly successful coaches out there, highly successful entrepreneurs out there, and there's always going to be that common thread of the habits they create. There's going to be the common thread of the people they're around, the common thread of the struggles they had. We're not that different. And once we start realizing that, that makes us that much more powerful.
Strength in numbers.
Yeah.
To know you're not alone is extremely empowering. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's being vulnerable.
I know I struggle with that a lot.
Yeah, being vulnerable.
Like, I'm terrified of water, because the best way to be buoyant and to float is not to struggle. And when I'm in a position where I don't feel like I have control or can hold on to anything, to be vulnerable and let go and try to be buoyant and be present and there and just float, it's extremely hard for me.
Yeah.
It's something I struggle with, that I will guarantee you that I will get better at, but it's just a part of that process. Me understanding that that's how that whole scenario works is, I think, a big portion of that, but it's still like, there's a lake literally right over there, and to think about getting in that and just being in the center of it and floating, in the back of my mind, I'm already kind of talking myself out of doing it for that whole scenario. So
yeah, it's easy to talk yourself out of it. All you need is one.
But there's my decision, and there's me being the victim.
Yeah. It's little things, but the awareness in that's where the power is. Understanding that and being aware of it, that's a habit to get into. You have that habit, and every time you have that habit, one day we can use that. Mel Robbins, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, do it.
I got a buddy who's got a boat. All he talks about is taking me to Lake Norman and then throwing me in the lake and then driving that boat away. Either I'm going to figure it out or I'm going to die. Sounds great. in his mind.
Yep.
Terrifying to me, but it'll probably work, to be completely honest, because I'm not gonna let myself die. That's for sure.
That's how I learned how to swim.
Well, that's the curious part, is every time I've put myself in a position where I, usually intoxicated one way or another, have jumped into an unknown body of water with nothing else to hold on to, I'm always perfectly fine. But it's the second I'm not, I guess, back in my own head and I'm thinking about the scenario, and that's when I struggle. Because I've been in pools before, or lakes, or the ocean, and I've gone surfing in Hawaii, or scuba diving even, and literally like in a position where I would normally be panicking, and for whatever reason, like, everything's okay. And it's funny how I've been in those scenarios, yet still, like, to go into a little lake that's probably maybe 10 foot deep, and to be in the center of it is like, just the thought process, it freaks me out.
Yeah.
But
that's why we're here, because I'm sure someone feels the same way.
right, I'm just trying to take steps forward and make progress. That's literally what life is all about.
So you got anything else for owning mistakes? We touched on vulnerability. We touched on...
The initial portion of taking responsibility is super hard, but like anything else, the more you do it, the easier it gets. And I think you mentioned the whole, really the limitless amount of power that you'll obtain when you can literally take responsibility for everything. You're now in control of everything. And that's...
I like that.
Super deep.
And you like that because you like control.
Oh, man. It's the only way I think I'm into all this stuff. Is like I can take that power back.
Yeah.
Because the only thing you can honestly control in life is yourself. But it's amazing what can happen when you actually master that art and that ability to control yourself. Discipline is a hell of a thing. I know that's something I've learned a lot through, like, diet and exercise, and it's not easy, and it's a practice. You've got to do it every day. Kind of like yoga. People do yoga. I know I'm super guilty of it. I'll do it for a month or 6 months in a row, and then I'll stop, and you lose all that power, all that flexibility, all that strength. It's all about doing those little things. Those, like you mentioned when we were driving here today, those habits consistently. Finding out what things serve you and what don't. I think I was looking at something on the way to meet you this morning, and some monk was talking about we are all masters of distraction. That we give up all of our power to all of these things. Oh, the cell phone was a part of that conversation for sure. Give up all of our power, our time, and our attention to something that doesn't serve us. And I think one of the things he mentioned is when you break down your day, say you sleep 7 or 8 hours, you got 16 hours or so left, and most people think, oh, I'm distracted for 10 of those. Some TV time, maybe work, whatever that may be. So you have another 6 hours to do whatever you want. And he said, in reality, 13, 14 of those hours are completely eaten up by distraction. Not to say your job needs to be a distraction, but the cell phones, the TV, the social media, I mean, all of this stuff, and none of it serves you. You're lost in this fantasy world. Like, if you took those 14 hours of distraction and you spent 14 hours a day, 7 days a week to learn how to play the piano, how far you would get in 6 months. Where most people don't realize, if you take even a portion, not even the full 14 hours, and put it towards something productive or self-serving in your life, how much further you would be in 1 month, 2 months, 6 months. It's, you talk about compounding interest. It's those little things consistently, like going to the gym every day and just doing something for an hour. A year later, how much further you would have progressed in whatever that is you're doing. Or whatever it is, running. I mean, I don't know. I always go to something physical based, but piano is a great option too. Practice the piano every day for an hour, and 5 days a week for an hour. All of this stuff. And Like, I want to learn Spanish. I need to be doing that consistently for an hour every day, or 20 minutes even. Little things.
Mm-hmm.
But start to add those things in and then be consistent with those habits. And
Well, they say it takes 10,000 hours to be a master. So what does 9,000 hours look like? What does 5,000 hours look like? What does 1,000 hours look like?
right.
It's wherever you want to be. If you want to be a master at something, you need to put the time in. If you just want to be good at it, put some time in. You don't have to put, an hour every day, and you can put an hour every weekend. It just takes longer to get to where you want to go. But without that hour, without that 20 minutes, without that 10 minutes, people say a lot, I wish.
Well, that boils down to, again, owning your mistakes. People always make excuses for a lot of the simple mistakes they make every single day, like opening up Facebook and being on it for, I think what the average was, like 3.5 hours, 4 hours a day, that people find themselves 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and it accumulates over the course of that day. 4 hours buried in social media of some kind. And most people will give you a million excuses on why they can't. That ridiculous word, can't not look at it, or can't not be on it, or whatever,
Yeah.
And that is a prime example of not owning that mistake. And it's not a mistake in the sense that that's like the worst thing in the world you could possibly do, but it's a mistake in saying you don't have time when clearly you have time. Because if running away from reality is a priority, then how can you ever expect reality to get any better?
Yeah. If you can just own it, be like, I know I'm on Facebook too long, and this is why I'm not where I am, and at least you have self-awareness. And once you have the self-awareness, you can start to make changes if you decide to make those changes. And it's a process that will take a long time if you let it. It's also a process that can be fairly quick, depending on the goals you're setting. Because, there's people that want to be millionaires, and that's great. It's going to take a lot of time. Most people give up on that. That's why there's only so many millionaires. But if you say, hey, I need to make an extra $5,000 a year, that's not that hard to accomplish. You create those small habits.
Well, I think we should do, as we go through this, is like weekly challenges. I feel like giving someone something to do for a week is pretty obtainable. One of the people that I was mentored by and worked for a long time, and he's really got some traction now, is Andy Frisilla. And he has this whole thing out right now called 75 Hard, where I think it's 5 basic things that are super simple that you never really think about, but to do them every single day for 75 days consistently is a huge test of discipline. And most people, and he's completely right about this, will not do it. I've juggled the idea of going through that process myself, and I've talked myself out of it multiple times, which to me makes me a bitch. Like, I for whatever reason won't commit to it, and I feel like, even especially talking about this now, I have to do it just to prove to myself that I can. And I don't have that, I think he calls it like the bitch voice or the bitch mentality or whatever. And he's very abrasive in his approach, but he gets in people's heads, and I'm all for that. But I think for a lot of people, starting a little bit simpler would be a little better. To do something for 7 days, and then to take that momentum that you got from accomplishing that for a week and trying to stack that into 2 weeks, into 3 weeks. And instead of thinking of things as like these big major goals of 75 days, break them down into, do it for fucking 1 day or 2 days or a week, and see how far you can get. And once you do it for a week, push yourself a little. Try to go a little further. Instead of doing it for 7 days this time, do it for 8 days. I think that would be extremely enlightening for people for anything they're trying to do. And just to slide this in real quick, I'm not here to demonize Facebook. It's not the worst thing in the world. I do think it's a masterful piece of mind control that no one's really paying attention to, but people get distracted by other things as well. My girlfriend is overwhelmingly distracted by movies. She will sit there and burn 4 hours to watch 2 movies. So she's not on Facebook, but her mind's still gone. And again, nothing against movies. Time and a place. I think we talked about your son. 45 minutes of reading a book. Reading a book's a great thing, but I highly doubt that book is something increasing his mental capacity or value in life.
It's a book TV is what it is.
Oh, there you go. It's a novel, which is cool. I'm impressed that he's sitting down to read it and using his imagination more than just seeing someone else's dictation of what that scenario looks like, which is a good thing. But
like you said, time and a place. Most
of us go around and complain about the things that we don't have or the time we don't have to do them, when clearly it goes back to, again, some of the other things we've already talked about, like that self-awareness, taking inventory of what your day actually is and being honest with yourself about that, and then slowly implementing these things, taking responsibility for all this stuff. It's cool how it all kind of comes, and this is going to be my tagline for everything, but full circle. And understanding that, and hopefully, like you picking up this message, you can harness that power to make those changes in life. And it's not easy. I struggle with this shit every single day. Like,
same here.
I go through phases and seasons in life where I'm on top of it and I'm moving and shaking and making progress, and then something will derail me, and instead of getting right back on track or forcing my way through the obstacle and keep on chugging, it may take me months of sullying around and feeling negative, but knowing what I know will always put me ahead of the game of taking that next step forward and getting back on track and picking myself up and starting to move again. Was it Sylvester Stallone, or there's the whole quote about being knocked down 7 times and getting back up the 8th.
Yeah.
That's how winning is done, or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's super true. Like, for myself right now, I'm going to be 30 at the end of the month. And from a physical standpoint, I've spent probably the last year overanalyzing the habits that I want to take into being 30 and producing more of a healthy, longevity-focused life and lifestyle, that I'm probably more out of shape now than I was a year ago. And it's super depressing. And I have been beating myself up about it the past few days, but not giving myself the credit that through this past year, I may not have acted on all that stuff, but now I know what I need to do going into that. Now I just need to stop being a little bitch and start taking some action on it, and start my own personal challenges to myself of moving forward within that.
Yeah, a lot of the greats, actually, when you said stop being a little bitch and going harder, it reminds me of Joe Montana. He actually, I wish I could remember the name of the coach. I just saw a program on it. What Joe Montana told his coach was, coach me hard. And what that means is he's going to want to give up sometimes. He's going to want to hold back. But if he's coached hard, it's going to force him to do the hard things. It's going to force him to do that, because human nature is you want to protect yourself. You want to be in that safe place. You don't want to put yourself in a position that's vulnerable, or that, when the coach says, why did you screw up? He's making you own those mistakes. He's making you understand that what you did was wrong, but here's how you fix it. That's what a good coach does.
Well, all the coaches that I know I can remember are all the ones that I truly fucking hated while I had them as a coach. But I remember them because they also made me that much better, because they would not let me slack on my bullshit.
Right.
Ever. And I may have been mad or pissed off or felt like a piece of shit, but they were always there to remind me of what I needed to do to excel, but they were also always there to let me know when I did it right. They never let me let myself down.
That's
is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable to think about. My mindset always goes back to like high school football, and football practice was fucking awful. I always dreaded it, especially 2 days in August. It's hot, it's humid, you don't want to be there, but being in that scenario with the coaches that were going to make you run and push you further and push you harder, it was amazing how in such a short period of time, not only myself but our entire team would move forward and come together. And it was all because someone was looking over our shoulder, not letting us be a little bitch, getting rid of all those excuses and pushing us forward. And if you didn't want to be a part of that, if you couldn't get through that, you weren't on the team. It really develops a lot of heart, which to me, again, the whole full circle factor and the whole being connected to something bigger than us. Like, a heart is literally everything. If you have the heart to withstand anything, you can have everything.
Well, it's like you always say, these aren't exclusive. All these thought processes and practices and habits, it's what it takes.
This has like been transcending time for forever. I've been on this whole kick with like ancient cultures, and you talk about different religions and all of this stuff, and it's weird. This underlying message is very, very similar to like these success properties. Now it goes a little bit further in like the whole spiritual based realm, but to me they're like universal truths. All of this stuff is consistent, and it's been consistent forever, whether it's been like written down or defined is a different scenario, but it's universal law, man. It just is what it is, and understanding that, it's so beautiful and so powerful and so enlightening.
The best part about it, to me, is it's not exclusive. It's a group everyone can be a part of. It's a practice everyone can use. But at the same point, it is exclusive because not everyone is going to use it because it's hard. So when you put yourself in a position of the minority, you actually place yourself above the average person because you're doing the hard stuff that most people aren't going to do.
Well, also, to that same note, don't let anyone tell you you can't. Because it's weird. The further I get into this, you find a lot of people who figure this stuff out and that are successful. And luckily lately, it seems like, I guess with the expansion of social media, again, this is one of the good points of it, is people are putting this information out there more readily, and no one's there to filter it or stop it, to start to remind people, kind of like us right now in this podcast, of your personal power. And for a long time, I think people have been put in a corner, put in their place, and had limitations placed upon them that should never have been there. And if anyone ever tells you you can't do something, they're full of shit. If you want it that bad, you will figure it out. And if you can't figure it out on your own, the heart, the desire to do so will lead you to the people that will help you get you where you want to be.
I guess the message for today is document mistakes you've made and kind of see what you could have done different, or what you did right, or what you should do. Whatever, just document it. Write it down, put it on paper, look at it, be aware of it.
And go through today and take ownership of everything, whether you did it or not, and watch how by the end of the day today, you were going to feel so much more powerful and way more in control. Because even if it wasn't something you did, you're taking ownership of how it affects you and how much control you actually have of yourself, your emotions, and then eventually your entire scenario in your life.
I'm glad you put it that way, because when you own, just like you said, when you own something that you didn't do, your brain now goes into solution mode for everything. And what I've said for years, I don't know if I've said it on this podcast, but what I've said for years is people should be based on the size problem they can solve. So if you go into solution mode and start solving all these problems, you watch your net worth go up. And that's just a natural flow of how everything is going to work. Because you look at the people in the world and look at the size problems they solve, and you look at their net income, you'll see a common thread. So I guess that's it for this episode, Ownership of Mistakes.
Thanks for joining us. If this message has moved you in any way, all we ask is you take 3 steps. 1, take action. 2, tell a friend.
And always speak
your
truth.